Hi, welcome to a brand new episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. I am your host, Jordan Ramirez, and today joining me is my special guest, Ryan Estrada. It's good to see you.
How you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you so much. Now, the film that Ryan has picked for today's episode is Castaway on the Moon, released in 2009. And let me see if I have the direction and the cast. Lee Hae-jun, Jae-yeong Jeong, Ryeo-won Ryeo-won Jung, and Yeong-seo Park. Forgive me if I mispronounce these names. I'm not that good at trying to pronounce Korean names correctly. Um, so, uh, so what made you? So why did you pick this film, and why were you so interested in this picture?
Well, I have been living in Korea on and off since 2002. And when I moved to Korea, it was amazing. It was like discovering this entire new history of film that I didn't know existed. And especially going there in the early 2000s, there was this huge wave of cinema where a lot of new filmmakers were getting freedom because Korean cinema was still trying to decide what it was. And so people had the freedom to experiment and do new things. And so the early, from between 2000 and 2010 was like this golden age of Korean cinema. Around 2010 is where the rest of the world started noticing, and all of those amazing filmmakers got like pulled into Hollywood and were stuck in production hell and projects that took like a decade to make, and it kind of killed the industry for a while. But for that decade, it was great. And I chose Castaway on the Moon just because I think it's a good example of the thing that I love about that era of cinema, which is a genre that I call but with a dork, where there's a lot of films where they take a plot that you would see in a Hollywood movie, sometimes directly from a Hollywood movie, like in this one obviously took some inspiration from Castaway.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds more like that in the English title is Castaway on the Moon. That's not what it's called in Korean. I think that's kind of a marketing hook for Western audiences.
Mm.
But basically, they'll take this plot, but what if we put an absolute dork in the lead? And there's a lot of these Korean movies that are parodies. They feel like parodies, but they're not, you imagine like, Naked Gun, just like not taking it seriously. But by putting someone in that situation that has no right to be in that situation, it kind of adds more stakes. Even if the stakes are smaller, it adds more personal stakes and makes you care about the characters. So when I watch this movie, I just love the fact that it has all the drama of Castaway where he's stuck in the middle of the ocean, but he's literally in the middle of the Han River, which is just, you can see the buildings. He could walk home. He has a
Mm-hmm.
cell phone. He has a boat. He could just wade back to civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But but then having to tell that story and take it seriously adds so much more genre because they need to explain why he doesn't do it. So I just love that movie and I wanted the chance to talk about it.
Oh, that it's really great. So it is an interesting film, and I did pick it up, albeit a little bit later after I saw it, that it was basically Castaway, but stuck on an island. And the addition of this in the film, she's referred to as female Kim, and she is what I interpreted in the film. She's interpreted as basically a hermit who lives inside her own room. She has a schedule that she describes about her working schedule, and she doesn't leave her room. Like she's it's basically like she never got a chance to live outside of her room, except when she has her own schedule. But the moment that she discovers the male Kim, that was when I noticed she began to, well, her character started to change, progressing sort of like this pen pal relationship, which I thought was a pretty interesting idea. Because when she notices him, she starts taking photographs, she starts sending him messages in a bottle on this island that's basically in the middle of, as you mentioned, right close to where these buildings are. I thought it was a pretty interesting character and story progression as it moved on. Um, and it is an interesting movie, though. I enjoyed it very much. So did you also notice the relationship between the male version of the Kim character and the female version of the Kim character as well?
Yeah, the title, like I mentioned, the title, the original title was Kimchi Purugi, which basically translates to like Kim's life adrift, and it describes both characters because they're both adrift, and they both they have so many struggles in their life they don't know how to handle that they want to be alone. And the line that really summarizes the whole thing is where she says that she takes photographs of the moon because there's no one there, and
Mm,
if you're the only person, you can't feel lonely.
mm,
And so she kind of walls herself away. She won't even talk to her own mother. Like she only answers her mother through text. And because of that, she doesn't feel lonely. And um, Kim on the island feels the same way. He's ready to jump off of a bridge or jump off of a building because he feels that no one cares about him. But then once he kind of accepts that he wants to be on this island and he's there by choice, then he no longer feels alone. There's that moment where he says, I'm bored. And he's like, blissful boredom. Like he's so happy that he's alone. And
mm,
then the connection between those two characters is that they discover they can be alone together. Like they basically fall in love, even though like he doesn't even know who this person is, but they have this connection where there's another person who's alone like them. Uh, and it's not until they can't make that connection that then they can be lonely again because they know that there is someone ignoring them, and then they feel alone again. So it's really about how we choose to accept our place in the world, and how we accept the people around us and loneliness.
mm. I actually did pick that up as I was watching the film, the theme of loneliness, the idea of being adrift, and also the communication moments between these two characters, and also the moment where they start to have some sort of a disconnect, which I thought was pretty interesting as I watched this film from beginning to end. And also just watching it from, I don't know, just from the first time watching it, I thought it was a pretty interesting idea too, to have these two characters who are basically the same, even though they're two different genders, even though one's male Kim and the other's female Kim. I actually did think it was a pretty interesting idea. So I did look up your website, ryanestrada.com, and you are also an illustrator and cartoonist, is what I read.
Hmm.
Oh, and
Yep, I
you'll
am an author artist adventurer.
so when was it that you first began the idea of wanting to become a writer and an adventurer and an illustrator? Like when did you first realize that you could go to this goal?
Well, I mean, it's something I decided before I have memories, like before I could talk. I was ready to become a professional cartoonist, and when I turned 6, I decided it was time to go pro. I started sending packets out to newspapers and bothered the same newspaper until they hired me 10 years later at the age of 16, and it's just what I've been doing ever since. I started traveling uh, right after college. That's not something I ever planned on, but I graduated from animation school the same year that the entire animation industry got laid off and
Mm,
there were no jobs. So I accepted a job teaching English in South Korea, and I realized that I can, travel anywhere I want and make comics. So I just kept doing that. And for about a decade, I moved to a new country every year. And now I'm kind of settled back down here in Korea and making books and writing things that I'm passionate about. And that's become my full-time job.
mm. And I did look at your website that you wrote a book called The Banned Book Club, which, because I'm in the state of Florida, you mentioned is ironically banned in my home state of
Yep.
Florida, which um I just find it amazing that you were able to write these books and that you wrote a book that is banned in my home state. And I always wanted to interview somebody who would get the feeling of what it's like to have one of your own books, literally titled Banned Book Club, to be banned in my home state of Florida. I don't know if you consider that something ironic or if it's like there's no loss in, or there's no humor in that anymore. It's almost like meaningless or something like that.
It's very ironic that when we wrote the book, it's a true story based on my wife's experiences under a dictator in South Korea in the 1980s. And we thought we were writing about history because those things weren't happening in the US when we started working on it. And by the time the book came out, not only were these things happening in America, but then of course our book became one of them. And yeah, it's been banned in two different districts in Florida at this point. And yeah, I actually flew out to Florida I think early last year.
Hmm.
And I was going to go speak at the school district where it was banned. And then the librarians were like, actually, we changed our mind. Please don't come. It's too scary. Like, I don't want to cause trouble. So I ended up going to a different town and doing a kind of a public event and speaking there. But yeah, it's been pretty shocking, the stuff that's been happening, especially in Florida, where librarians can be charged with a felony just for having a book that one person complained about on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, I like, I mean, I do want to say that I stand up for the librarians, and I think that we need more people being aware of these books that are being banned. But I also think that what my home state is going through, and not just here, but in, I imagine, other states where they're banning more books, it's pretty shocking that it's history repeating itself and that it's basically uh I don't want to get too political, but that it's like this whole culture war shift to me has gone too far to the point where it's more like it's trying to be reactionary and less of a reason and less of reasoning and why these books had to be banned. It's just for whatever it is to be reactionary. So I thought this to me had gone too far and I just couldn't accept it because we need
Yeah.
learning and we need more new perspectives from these books than what other, let's say, places would say is acceptable. I don't know why. But yeah, I, as a Floridian myself, I don't feel proud of, having the largest amount of book bans in the state and also having these librarians threatened by these new laws, because I think that it's not something I approve of, because we need librarians, we need more students to learn about these books. And for me right now, I'm just hoping that maybe uh I don't know if it's going to be this year or the year after or whenever, maybe when something changes, then we can see more book bans being, we could see less book bans and more books being, shown to kids and all these sorts of things. And then maybe things would be different. So I don't know when that would be. I'm not a predictor or anything, but I just thought this is something that I think is important, even to authors who I think need these books to be taught in schools, to learn about
Yeah,
history
I
and to
mean,
learn about, yeah. No,
yeah,
go
the
ahead.
irony is I wish that the people who had banned my book had read it because they might learn something. I like we talk about in Florida how there's so many book bans, but it's two people. I know them. Like
Yeah.
they act like it's this huge movement of parents, but it's two people. I don't know about the second one, but the first one does not even have a kid in the school district.
No,
It's politically motivated. There's
yeah.
two of them. They each do hundreds of books per month, and yeah, I know them well. We became pen pals for a while. I tried to make sense of them, and I couldn't do it.
Uh, well, I mean, that's just something that I wish we saw less of, like uh adults pretending they have kids when they don't have kids just to have their books banned or whatever, just to, I don't know, maybe score points or just to get headlines or whatever. I don't know. It, to me, it just feels weird that, you would see these types of people trying to do this just to, I don't know, just to make themselves famous or whatever. But yeah, I just thought it would be great to talk to you about this. I did like the fact that you chose this film and that you mentioned you had done, you were a film critic is what I read, or were you like a film critic for a radio show? So tell us, so do you want to describe a little bit about that?
But yeah, well, I mean, I've done a lot of film reporting for Busan EFM, which is a radio station here in Korea, and I've worked with like KoreaFilm.org. I'm a regular reporter on the Busan International Film Festival, which is the largest film festival in Asia. I've also had some of my films play at the Busan International Short Film Festival, uh, and I've kind of been on a lot of different film podcasts talking about many different things, but for a lot of them, I've kind of become their Korean film correspondent just because there's so many films that I love from this country that not enough people know about. So
Mm,
I've been on a lot of different films, like podcasts like Screen Drafts and School of Movies, and a lot of different niche podcasts like Action Addicts and all these other shows. And I sometimes I talk about Hollywood movies, but a lot of times I love talking about Korean movies just because not enough people know about some of the good ones.
mm, yeah. So, speaking of Korean movies, what are your thoughts about like Hollywood productions Americanizing Korean movies? What is your reaction? Do you feel like mixed, like it's some positive and some negative, or what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't happen as often as you hear about. They're constantly talking about, like, if you look at the Wikipedia for any Korean film, it's like the American remake was announced on this date, and it's like, yeah, that was 10 years ago. I guess that didn't happen. It's been few, but the ones they always push hardest are the ones that don't make any sense at all. Like they were talking about doing an American remake of Train to Busan, and I'm like, train transportation isn't really a thing in the US. And also, like, the trains are so slow, you could like jump off. Like the whole point is it's a bullet train. You can't get off of it.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, it's for me, when it comes to adaptations like that, I'm always in the camp of like, if the creator is going to get a paycheck, hey, go for it. The original still exists. Like I'm all for indie creators getting paid, and I know that Korean cinema, especially during the area where they're talking about, was a much smaller industry, and maybe people didn't get as much money as they deserved working on these films. So if someone wants to do a Hollywood remake and give them a bunch of money to make a version that is slightly suckier, then hey, who cares? This guy made a good movie. Let him make a couple of bucks.
hmm. Well, that's good to know. I mean, uh, I mean, I had a previous guest on who introduced me to another Korean movie, so you're not the first one to introduce me to a Korean movie. And she discussed about K-dramas and K-comedy and K-pop, which before I was hesitant about doing it because it was like new for me, because almost everywhere when you see like a streaming service or a streaming platform or wherever, you would see like Korean shows or Korean movies, and they used to be, and they're not just in one streaming platform, they're like in different streaming platforms in the United States, as I can tell. Because I did not know that there were like genres and subgenres that existed within like this one category of Korean movies, where it's not just like one genre is action, one genre is comedy, it's like different subgenres. So I just thought I wanted to let you know that you're not the first, but you're the second to introduce me to a Korean movie. And now I have watched two different Korean movies. Snowpiercer, I was originally thinking that was, I think, was more like a Korean English co-production or American co-production. I don't know how you would describe it. Before it was turned into I think it was a TNT series.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
s-
that I think was a technically a French co-production because it was
okay,
based on a French comic book production.
yeah, and it was like an international cast. Like you had some big
Yeah.
names. Uh, but you also mentioned that you love Bong Joon-ho movies. So
Oh yeah.
when did you start showing your affection or love for his movies? Like what was the first film from his work that made you want to say, I liked his work, I want to see what else he had done?
Yeah, I think probably the first Bong Joon-ho movie I saw was The Host, his monster movie, which is another one of those but with a dork movies because it's like a monster is attacking Seoul, and it within the plot it's about how the government doesn't protect people from what they need to be protected from, and so it's up to like the last people you could ever imagine solving the problem. Like it always, when I watch Hollywood movies, like it doesn't really grab me when there's like the superhero who can solve any problem. Like, or James Bond, if he has a thing in his pocket that will solve any problem. I
Mm,
don't care about that then because you can solve any problem. But with the host, You have a guy who only got his job running a snack stand by the river because his dad owns it, and he still can't even do that job. He falls asleep and lets kids steal from him. So he can't even do the easiest job in the world, yet he has to save soul from a monster. And that's my type of movie.
Mm,
So once I saw that, I fell in love and started watching all his other movies.
mm. Did you get to see his Oscar-winning film Parasite?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Uh,
Excellent film.
yeah, all right. Uh, but yeah, that movie I've heard so much about, as well as his other films like Memories of Underdevelopment, Old Boy, which I know was remade in the US. And I don't know if this was him.
Old Boy is not
OKJ.
Bong Joon-ho, but yeah.
Oh, it's not Bong Joon-ho?
Okja.
Okja. Okay. I don't know if that was him or was that
Okja is Bong Joon-ho, but no,
uh,
Old Boy is not Bong Joon-ho.
okay, I thought that was him. I guess it was another filmmaker. I got that mistaken. But yeah,
Mhm.
I thought that was pretty interesting. That that you got to mention that. So I know that I have seen besides those two Korean movies and I guess the third, I also was mentioning to my previous guest that I did see an adaptation of a Korean show that was Americanized, The Good Doctor, a medical drama that I know it's ending its last season this year. But it was pretty interesting to watch, like you know, to watch an American version. I know I haven't seen the Korean version of it, which I understand. When you watch the credits of a show, either it was an adaptation of a show, and they always have to say created but based on the Korean series by this name, because you can't have the American creator claim that they created the show when the actual person who created it, as you mentioned, they have to receive a paycheck or they have to receive an on-screen credit, or else I don't know what would happen that if you didn't give them credit for the previous project that they had done. But it's good that I got to but it's good that I got to see this. So you also mentioned that you had done film festivals, you had done radio podcasts or radio shows and podcasts. Um, but were there other Korean filmmakers or let's say some big names in Korean cinema that attracted you or had that you felt like maybe this actor or this filmmaker did not have enough recognition? Because you mentioned that you had some obscure favorites. Like, what are some of your
Mhm.
recommendations for like for my audience, basically, if they have not seen obscure Korean cinema? Maybe what would turn them on to maybe this film or that film?
All right. Well, I'll say if you're interested in this, but with a dork genre that I've mentioned, I'll give some favorites from that. If you want to get obscure, I'll get really obscure. There's a movie that is impossible to find now. I have no idea why it has just ceased to exist. You can't find it on DVD, but occasionally you can, if you find a copy. It's called Breakout. The Korean title is Ryeo-won,
Okay.
and it is basically the plot of Under Siege 2, where a gangster has hijacked the train and there's only one man who can save the day. But he doesn't care about saving the day. He just cares that the gangster picked up his lighter in the bathroom and he wants his lighter back. And he's had a really bad day and he used his last 50 cents to buy a plastic lighter so he could smoke, and his entire self-esteem is wrapped up in getting that lighter back. And the gangster's entire self-esteem is wrapped up in not giving it back because he doesn't want his underlings who are like starting to question him see him look weak. And it's just a masterclass in low stakes being shown to be the most important thing in the world.
Mm.
So Breakout, there's a movie called The Foul King with one of the early films from Song Kang-ho, who was in Parasite, and it's a wrestling movie about a banker who takes up wrestling as a hobby. The man never wins a fight. He never gets the girl. He never accomplishes anything. It's just like everything you in these movies, like anything that you see the genre, you're like, oh, that's going to happen by the end of the movie. It's not going to happen because these people are terrible at their job.
Mm,
Memories of Murder, you mentioned, Bong Joon-ho movie is another film where it's hunting down a serial killer, and this is a true story based on a real serial killer, and the but with a dork thing is historically accurate because the police had no resources, so it's just completely uneducated idiots who have no right being police officers investigating a crime in the dumbest possible way and like letting all the evidence be destroyed and just corruption and just idiots. Um, that's a masterpiece. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to lecture you on all of there's so many films like this that I love,
mm.
but yeah, just that's a few you can check out.
Okay. So is it the Foul King, like Fowl?
The Foul King.
Okay. The
Yeah,
Foul King.
Foul.
Oh, Foul. Okay. The Foul King,
Yeah.
Breakout, and Memories of Murder, recommendations by our guest Ryan Estrada. Really great suggestions. And you mentioned Breakout. It's impossible to find. You can't find it on any streaming platform. And you said it ceased to exist on DVD. But it's one of those films that you may have to find, or it's impossible to like find it on whatever website may or may not have it.
Yeah, it's every once in a while you'll see it floating around, and it's worth seeking out because it's such an interesting, uh, just such low stakes, but you really feel them.
Mm, that's good.
It's
Um,
like when we watch Hollywood movies, we've seen like the world's ending or the universe is ending so many times that it's like that doesn't mean anything to us anymore, and it never really did because like we can't grasp that those stakes. But
mm,
when the stakes are that dude has my lighter and I need to smoke. Like I can understand. I don't smoke, but I can get that. Or this,
mm,
if we're going back to the movie we're discussing, like the stakes are, uh, you know, I'm alone on this island, and even though I literally found a duck boat and I could just take it, like it's the stakes are more personal of why he won't leave. So I love these small stakes movies.
that's good. So the Castaway on the Moon, as you mentioned, is the second film that you brought up. The first one I saw was a film that my guest had brought up called The Dude in Me, which was released in 2019. So basically, it's a body swap movie involving a gangster and a teenager who is not defensive. He's very vulnerable. And the way I described it was basically, or the way I saw it was basically like it's a take on Freaky Friday, but with a young teenager who is now inside the body of a gangster and the gangster inside the body of a teenager, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it's very complex and there's a lot of character and story development. And the humor I thought was interesting too, because I mean, I don't know if there were any other body swap movies that I could think of besides that one, or I think the other one that I could think of was the change up between Ryan Gosling and some other actor. I think Jason Bateman was the other one. I don't remember, but it was an interesting movie, The Dude in Me from 2019, and it's a wonderfully, I would say, funny Korean comedy that I got to enjoy. But it was a film that I thought was interesting, and I checked it out, and it was pretty good. So I thought maybe I
Excellent. Yeah,
don't know.
I've never seen that one.
So this film is directed by Hyo-jin Kang. Sorry if I mispronounced the names. And it was released in 2019. I think it was like a mainstream Korean comedy film. It's on in the United States, it's on Tubi TV on the platform. It may be on other streaming platforms. I don't know if it's on DVD in Korea. But if it's there, it's a really interesting movie that I thought was had a pretty interesting concept, and it's also a pretty interesting narrative. It's basically like blending the gangster genre, the comedy genre, like the buddy comedy type movie, and it's also a high school movie, which I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, check it out, The Dude and Me from 2019. I don't know what your take on it will be, but I hope you enjoy it.
There's another, I don't know if you could call it a body swap movie,
Mm-hmm.
but there's another Korean movie called The Beauty Inside. And the
Okay.
plot of that, it's a romantic comedy, but the twist is that the the male, I guess you call him the male lead, every time they fall asleep, they wake up in a new body. So sometimes it's a man, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's an elderly person, sometimes it's a child, and they're trying to have a romance with this person while going under. I'm trying to find the number of actors that they had play this character,
Mm.
but it's like something like 300 actors played this one character because
Oh.
every time you cut back, it's a different person, and so
Hmm.
yeah, it's I love these weird twists that they take up when they
Yeah, I
make
mean
movies.
I mean it's a pretty interesting concept. I imagine it's not the only trope that they use for these movies that they take from inspiration from Hollywood, but I thought it was one of the more
Mhm.
interesting twists on an old trope that Hollywood has used in the past, but in these Korean movies they would take it to a whole new level. Another movie that I was interested in watching, but I don't think I ever got a chance to see it. The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, from 2013.
Mhm.
Um, I think I don't know if it's a take on these spaghetti westerns like the Sergio Leone type films, or if it's meant to reinvent the western genre, but something more comedic is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that was described as instead of a spaghetti western, they called it a kimchi western,
oh,
and it's very
kimchi.
much kind of a love letter to the old spaghetti westerns. It's not it's the same director as The Foul King. I prefer The Foul King to that one, but yeah, I
Mhm.
found it interesting. But yeah, it's like I said, the way they take these genres and play with them is another example of how much they do that. Like there's a movie called The Chaser.
Mm.
And if when I describe it to people, it sounds like a goofy comedy. So
Hmm.
it's basically like another one about hunting a serial killer, except when there's the movie about a serial killer, they'll introduce one character, you're like, oh, that's the guy that's gonna catch him. It's either the cop on their last day or the guy who used to be in law enforcement, but now he has like a shady job, or there all these different characters. Every single one of them is in this movie. And
Mm.
every single one of them has every resource they need to catch the bad guy.
Hmm.
And they all fail against all odds. And to the point that, like, at one point, they have him in handcuffs in the jail cell, and he casually admits everything, and they still let him go. At one point, you see, he like ties up a woman and walks out, and all of a sudden, you see one of the heroes come flying up, slam his car into his and jump out, and you're like, oh, he finally figured out. And he goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going. You realize he didn't even know what was going on. It
Oh.
sounds like a comedy, but this is like one of the darkest movies you'll ever see in your life. It's
Mm.
played completely straight, and to the point that, like, I was watching it with a group of friends that weren't as familiar with the tropes of Hollywood movies,
Mm.
and I'm laughing hysterically because I can see the where it's playing with the tropes, and they're all looking at me like, I think Ryan's a serial killer. Why is he laughing at this?
Yeah. So what is the title of the movie again, so that my audience could look this up?
Yeah, The
Uh,
Chaser.
on the Chaser. Okay. So
Yeah.
okay, so we have a few minutes left. So before we wrap things up, do you have any last words or statement about this film so that maybe my audience maybe could tune into this film and maybe they could get something out of it?
But yeah, I mean, if you've listened this far, we haven't really explained what it's about, but it's basically about a guy who tries to jump off a bridge and then lands on one of the little tiny islands that are holding up a bridge in the middle of the Han River, which is just a river winding through the city of Seoul. And you can literally see cars going by. And so he acts out Castaway, but he's in the middle of the city, and it's because he decides that, hey, you know what, life is actually better here, that he kind of sticks to it, and it was mentioned, he makes this connection. And so it's a really fascinating look at a character and why someone would decide to live this way. So I hope people check it out and enjoy it.
Thank you so much. And where can my audience find you and maybe learn more about you, like websites or social media handles?
If you go to ryanestrada.com, All the links are there to social media. There's also lots and lots of free comics you can read. There's a comic where you can learn to read Korean in 15 minutes if you are into Korean movies and want to learn the alphabet. And there's lots of information about books. You mentioned Banned Book Club. I have a sequel to that coming out this year called No Rules Tonight.
Ooh.
Just this week, I have a new book coming out called Student Ambassador of the Silver City. That's part of my student ambassador series of like adventure stories around the world, and this kid that solves mysteries. And there's all kinds of stuff there you can check out, and a lot of it is inspired by what I learned from watching Korean movies and realizing that you can find weird twists and turns to tell a story.
Okay. Thank you so much. And maybe in the future we could talk a little bit about some other Korean movies. You're always welcome to come to the show, and maybe if there was another Korean movie like the ones you mentioned and recommendations, we could talk more about them. So, yeah, it was great talking to you, Ryan, and I hope that your books I hope to read your books in the future. So, thank you for
Excellent.
being on the show, and it was a real honor to have you on the show. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this is Jordan Ramirez, host of the Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez podcast, signing off. And this has been my guest, Ryan Estrada, wonderful author, illustrator, and and let's just say a correspondent on Korean movies. So I want to thank you for that honor, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Jordan Ramirez signing off, and until then, I'll see you at the movies. And it was nice talking to you again, Ryan. I hope we'll meet each other in the future someday.
Of course.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.